Kyudo is a smoke-addicted creep who somehow managed to rizz up his baddie coworker despite living on food stamps. However, when she suddenly forgets everything about him, he decides to keep his freak side under control to fix her amnesia. It all starts on a random morning, as a baddie named Kyujuri drags herself out of bed for a quick smoke before getting ready for work. Moments later, she heads out and spots a couple of locals watching news about a company called Generic Terra that supposedly cracked the code to upload human memories and immortality. Shortly after that, she finally reaches the office, and Lee immediately points out the fact that she is later than usual, so she tries to clock in, but Kyudo suddenly pushes past her to slot his card in first. As a result, she ends up being a minute late and complains about it before handing over the new house listings. He tries to ignore her with the hope that she will let it slide, but she continues calling him childish, so he offers to take her to lunch as an apology. While he and Lee start a conversation about their city's nostalgic vibe, Kyujuri begins to notice that her glasses prescription feels off. Hours later, she takes Kyudo to a new restaurant and asks if they can try it out, but he refuses and drags her all the way to their usual spot. Upon seeing the disappointed look on her face, he takes his dumpling close to her face to convince her that it tastes better than anything else. But her eyes start acting up again. The next moment, he sees the eye drop she is using and warns her against trusting the company behind it because its new CEO looks like a ladyboy that eats lip filler for breakfast. After talking about an apartment that hasn't been getting any new tenants, they both start heading back, but when she asks if he wants to get tea with the time they have left, he tells her to go get an eye checkup instead. Shortly after the checkup, she returns to the office, and Lee gives her a compliment because she looks good without the glasses. He then asks Kyudo for his opinion, but he claims the glasses actually looked better on her. Later that day, they go up to burn a bunch of old documents, and while typing to stretch, Kyudo sees the Generic Terra pyramid and starts ranting about the hate he has for the company and their goal to create a more advanced world. After they both light up their smokes, Kyujuri says she still wants to try out the new restaurant before it closes down. Kyudo then reminds her that Kowloon is an extremely nostalgic city that thrives on its residents' love for the old way of life and always ignores any attempt for change. He goes on to say that the nostalgic feeling reminds him of being in love. But then Kyujuri suddenly says that she gets the same feeling whenever she is around him. Just as she explains that it doesn't mean she loves him, he stops himself from kissing her and says she has a lot of face wrinkles. At the office the following day, Lee asks why she is back on glasses, so she explains that it's a fake one just to help her work better because she hasn't gotten used to not needing one. When Kyudo says she is just trying to hide the old lady wrinkles on her face, she sees a stain on his shirt and tries to clean it. He then pulls away and says he has a rule to always touch the number 8 whenever he sees it painted on a wall. After dark, he finally completes all his tasks for the day and grabs his coat before telling her to pack up so they can go get dinner. Minutes later, she notices that they aren't heading to the usual spot. But when she tells him, he ignores her until they end up in a busy restaurant chain in the heart of the city. He then takes her on a food tour to taste everything they can swallow until she reaches breaking point. Before going home, he decides to take her to one last spot called the Goldfish Tea House, and once they enter, a waiter named Gen welcomes Kyudo like he is a regular and quickly takes their order while Kyujuri obsesses over the goldfish. After Gen serves their iced coffee with a plate of watermelon, Kyujuri immediately starts feasting and lights up a cigarette as well before telling Kyudo that it tastes better with watermelon. Upon seeing the shocked look on his face, she asks if it sounds weird to him, but he says someone has said those exact words to him once before. On the way out moments later, Gen expresses how excited he is to see Kyudo back with his girlfriend, and she tries to explain that they are just co-workers, but Kyudo starts calling out to her. When she eventually tells him about it, he simply says she shouldn't worry about it before giving her a goldfish to take care of. Days later, she decides to spend her Saturday repainting the old unit they were talking about the other day, but after hours of battling the heat stroke, her last remaining brain cells evaporate. As she tries to paint the last wall, her consciousness starts to fade, but Kyudo shows up right on time to catch her. After giving her a cold tea to help with the heat, he picks up the brush to finish the last wall while she slowly realizes that she is in love with him. At the start of the following week, she finds him sleeping on the office couch and realizes it would be the perfect chance to tease him. However, her plan suddenly takes a drastic turn when he grabs her by the hair and pulls her in for an aggressive makeout session. The next moment, he fully wakes up and pushes her away before getting up to leave, saying he thought she was someone else. Shortly after that, he asks for lunch suggestions and casually leaves to get some, causing her anxiety to reach new heights as she struggles to understand what is going on with him. Upon seeing his files scattered across the floor, she tries to pack it up but notices a photo of him with someone else sticking out of the drawer. After pulling it out and seeing herself in the picture, she clocks out and ends up at the Goldfish Tea House. As she pulls out the picture to take another look, Gen tells her that they had a lot of fun on the night it was taken. But this confuses her, so she asks how he knows about it. He then reminds her that it was the night she got engaged to Kyuduo, and he was the one who took the photo. On her way back home, Kyujuri remains lost in thought about the picture until a tenant calls to complain about their noisy neighbor. After getting the address, she promises to look into it and immediately tracks down the noisy neighbor's apartment. The moment she rings the bell, an ungodly amount of horror movie teddies begin to fall out, nearly giving her a heart attack. Just then, Yaomei crawls out and tries to explain that she has to make hundreds of them, but Kyujuri drops to the ground to get her heart rate back to normal. Moments later, Yaomei offers her a cup of tea and continues explaining why she has turned her place into a doll factory, before noticing that Kyujuri is barely paying attention. When she offers to get her some painkillers in case the jump scare really got to her, Kyujuri slides over the photo, so Yaomei takes one look at it and asks if Kyuduo is cheating on her. Kyujuri then says that she isn't the one in the photo, but Yaomei takes another look and says she is definitely the one. Kyujuri goes on to say that she is only his co-worker and further explains that seeing that picture made her realize that she has absolutely no memory of her past. Upon hearing this, Yaomei slides the picture back and says she probably isn't the girl in it. But this confuses Kyujuri, so Yaomei says she also keeps her past locked away. After explaining how she spent top dollar to go from a human beluga to Sydney Sweeney, she gets up to prepare egg tarts and continues talking about how she would never acknowledge a past experience, even if someone from before her surgery recognizes her. While serving up the egg tarts, she also tells Kyujuri that it was the first thing she ate after waking up from the surgery. As they both eat, Kyuduo returns to the office and notices the missing photo, so he thinks back to the day he got transferred to the office and met Kyujuri for the first time. After a warm welcome, she took him out for a tour of the city and said his name sounded a lot like one of the good fortune phrases the locals love to use. She also told him that they considered 8 to be a lucky number before joining the senior citizens for a quick game of mahjong. Shortly after that, they ended up at the usual lunch spot, but seeing as it was his first time there, she made it clear that he should only ever take her out for lunch to the same exact place. When he asked why they couldn't try something else, she showed him the perfect dumpling in her spoon to shut him up. On the rooftop minutes later, she gave him a cup of her favorite watermelon juice before lighting up for a smoke. He then asked if there was anything else to know about Kowloon, and she suddenly said being in love should be at the top of his bucket list. The weird suggestion shocked him, so she decided to explain how Kowloon's nostalgic vibe made her obsessed with living there and told him to try falling in love if he really wanted to get the full experience. While also preparing for a smoke, he reminded her of the government's plans to demolish Kowloon, but she told him not to worry because they had been saying the same thing for years. The following night, Kyujuri and Yaomei decide to try a fried chicken restaurant, and they both fall in love with the chef after the first bite. When Yaomei asks why she seems to be a little more optimistic, Kyujuri pulls out the photo and says she still wants to figure out the truth behind her past. Yaomei then suggests asking Kyuduo about it, but after her face goes red at the thought of him, Kyujuri says they have to find another way because he would have said something if he wasn't trying to keep it secret. The next moment, Yaomei decides to use her brain for once and says she might have amnesia, which would explain why Kyuduo hasn't said anything, as he is probably waiting for her memories to come back. Kyujuri admits that her theory might not be completely worthless, but still wonders what Kyuduo thinks of her without her memories. By sundown the following day, he gets tired of working and asks if she wants to get dinner together, so she suggests trying the fried chicken restaurant instead of the usual spot. As he tries to explain why their usual spot is the best, she reminds him of the time she said being around him feels nostalgic. She then asks if he feels the same way, and when he says yes, she makes him look straight into her eyes to get a reaction out of him. The next moment, he leans in and grabs her ear before asking why she hasn't gotten it pierced and saying that her wrinkles are getting bigger. After she refuses to go with him, he summons his nonchalant alter ego and immediately walks out to eat on his own, while she returns the photo to his file drawer. Days later, the news channel informs everyone in Kowloon about a free checkup promo at the beauty and healthcare center run by Dr. Miyuki, the rich ladyboy Kyujo was ranting about the other day. Shortly after that, Kyujirai and Yaomei show up for the consultation, and Yaomei starts praying that she meets the doctor in person. When Kyujirai asks if he is really that big of a deal, Yaomei explains how he took over his father's company and turned into a globally famous cash cow. Just then, a girl named Shayahi runs up to greet Kyujirai, so she introduces the both of them to each other before they start taking as many free tests as possible. On the way to the final one, they see a lady offering free consultations for beauty procedures, and Yaomei immediately begs for a detour so she can make sure the implants in her melons are still in perfect condition. Upon seeing that they also offer anti-aging consultations, Kyujirai remembers all of Kudo's jokes about her wrinkles and decides to book an appointment. While she fills in the hospital form, Kudo has just heard that Gen suddenly decided to stop working at the Goldfish Tea House, so he leaves. Moments later, Yaomei and Kyujirai also hear the same thing, and Yaomei gets disappointed as she was hoping to interrogate him for every detail about the picture. After she asks Kyujirai for a description in case she runs into him again, they come across a roadside jeweler, so Kyujirai stops to look through his earrings while thinking of when Kudo suggested getting a piercing. Yaomei then tries to say that it will only make her look like the person she was in the past. However, one look at Kyujirai's face makes her realize that she wants to be like her past, so she decides to help by choosing one that looks similar to the picture. At the office the following day, Kudo checks Gen's apartment details to know if he moved, but the server mysteriously shuts down when he gets close. Just then, Kyujirai walks in, and Kudo freezes in shock upon seeing her new look with the earrings on. He immediately gets up to hold her, but just as he reaches for her face, she says the earrings are actually clip-ons because she isn't quite ready for an actual piercing. Kudo then tells her to stop the wannabe act and storms out. Hours later, she goes to Yaomei's place and drops the earring before bawling her eyes out and saying she was stupid for thinking that pretending like the girl in the picture would make him happy. While Yaomei apologizes for getting her hopes up and takes her inside, Kudo finds a spot in an alley to quietly deal with his emotions. Early the next day, Kudo joins her on the balcony for a smoke, and when she reminds him of his episode the other day, he apologizes and says he was just having a bad day. She initially accepts the apology but suddenly switches up her attitude and says she will only forgive him if he lets her pick their lunch spot for the day. After seeing how serious she is, he suggests going to dinner instead, so she can have all the time she needs to make him see why trying a new spot isn't so bad. Hours later, he tries his first fried chicken and ends up liking it, which causes Kyujirai to start singing "I Told You So" right in his face. Shortly after that, they leave the restaurant, and he holds her hand so she won't fall into a puddle, but this triggers a series of strong emotions from the both of them, so he leaves her hand before going to watch the generic Terra Pyramid. Days later, she takes Yaomei along for her beauty consultation. But before heading in to see the doctor, Yaomei makes her put on some lipstick because it's apparently disrespectful to see him with a plain face. When she enters his office moments later, Miyuki quickly takes a look at her file before walking over to get a feel of her face. He then starts asking a bunch of personal questions to understand her daily routine. But when she tells him about her suspicious amnesia, he quickly turns to hide a wicked smile and says her wrinkles have no history. This confuses her, so he explains that while regular people develop wrinkles due to their daily activities and the effect of time, her own seems to have been in her face right from the start of her existence. After suddenly saying that her lost memories might not even exist, he leans in and asks if he can get to know her better before wiping off her lipstick while sticking out a modified tongue. As she immediately storms out and takes Yaomei with her, he watches from the office and gets excited to see what comes next for her. Sometime in the past, Kyujirai took Kudo out to help one of the senior citizens she played mahjong with, but on the way back, he suddenly went out of breath, so she suggested taking a break at her place to cool off. Once they got there, he kept standing outside, and when she asked why, he admitted that he had never been in a baddie's apartment before. She then laughed at how naive he was and brought him inside before showing him to the sink so he could save himself from the heat stroke. After taking a glass of water from the refrigerator, he sat on her bed and took a look around while she went to the balcony to bring herself one step closer to lung cancer. At the start of the new week, Kyujirai decides to try on a new makeup to avoid another traumatic experience with anyone similar to Dr. Ladyboy. At the office later that morning, she tries to welcome Kudo, but Miyuki shows up with an assistant and almost gives him a heart attack. After Lee starts glazing harder than your girl at a Chris Brown concert, they take him to a table, and Kyujurai makes every effort to avoid eye contact while Kyuduo tries to find the perfect opportunity to knock the smile off his face. When Miyuki tells Lee to take his time looking for a new building location and claims to have already found what he wants while staring at Kyujurai, Kyuduo loses it and starts asking why he is trying to strip her with his eyes. Miyuki replies that he is just trying to appreciate her beauty, but Kyuduo gets up close and tells him to stop acting like he doesn't prefer chocolate-flavored glizzies. After soaking his eyes in pepper spray, Miyuki gets up to leave but suddenly pulls Kyujurai close for a sloppy kiss. He then tells her to leave the broke tobacco addict who didn't even notice her new lipstick and come be with him instead. Moments later, his assistant claims to have been shocked by the sudden kiss, so he reminds her that he takes whatever he wants before asking for gloves and a face mask to protect himself from poor people germs. Later that day, Kyuduo follows Kyujurai to a local shop so she can find a new tank for the goldfish. When she eventually finds one and realizes that it's too heavy, he offers to help her carry it back, and she uses that opportunity to add a broom to the purchase. Shortly after that, they get back to her place, and while she starts setting up the tank, he takes a look around and smiles when he notices that she still keeps her toothbrush in the same spot. However, after not finding any water in the fridge and seeing one of Yaomei's Halloween dolls on her table, he grabs a watermelon before heading to the balcony for a smoke. Just then, she comes up with a name for the goldfish, but he quickly loses interest in staying, so he wishes her luck and leaves. At the office the next day, he finds a sunflower at his table and asks if it's some kind of punishment, but she explains that it's her way of saying thank you for his help with the fish tank. Just then, Xiaohei shows up to tell Kyujurai that she needs help finding a new apartment, and when Kyuduo asks if the Yaomei's noise is still too much for her, she says it's actually because she needs a bigger spot for all her clothes. He then suggests throwing them away instead, but she calls him stupid for failing to understand the amount of work that goes into becoming the greatest fashion icon of the slums. The next moment, she sees the sunflower and gets excited, so he asks if she wants it, but then she asks if he has feelings for her and explains that giving someone a sunflower is a special way of saying you love them. Upon hearing this, Kyujurai immediately drags her away to hunt for apartments, but after hours of looking at different rooms, Xiaohei still says they haven't found the one. When Kyujurai asks if she has considered getting a place outside Kowloon, she suddenly says something about choosing to live out her past life in Kowloon before Kyuduo calls to say that he found a good spot. Moments later, Kyujurai tells him that she purposely skipped the room because it's weird, but when he opens the door, Xiaohei falls in love and says she loves teasing her claustrophobia with incredibly small spaces. Kyuduo then takes them up to see the roof, and while Xiaohei excitedly runs around, he gives Kyujurai some pointers for weird clients before Xiaohei calls them to see a cluster of sunflowers. Hours later, Kyujurai tries to pay for another watermelon, and after she drops a coin, a green-haired man in a mask suddenly picks it up. So she thanks him, but he remains silent and plays around for a bit before giving it back to her. In what appears to be a mansion later that night, two maids talk about the recent news circulating about the fact that Dr. Ladyboy might actually be an illegitimate son. While they continue gossiping, he starts a random conversation with the green-haired man from before, who also apparently likes taking it from the back. After the small talk, Miyuki asks for his thoughts on Kyujurai, and he admits that he was shocked by the fact that she looks and feels exactly the same as before. The next moment, he starts complaining of being hungry and asks if they can go get some food, but Miyuki tells him to go alone because he still has a ton of work to do. He then picks up the phone for an important call, but his zesty boyfriend pulls off his robe to feast on his Yakuza glizzy. The next day, Kyuduo meets up with the owner of a beverage warehouse to ask if he knows where Gwen moved to because he usually works with the restaurant. But the man reminds him that he should be the one with answers as a real estate agent. After saying that he could not get any info on Gwen's apartment history, he leaves and starts to wonder what the heck is going on in Kowloon. Meanwhile, Kyujurai tries to enjoy a smoke at Xiaohei's new apartment building, but the masked glizzy gobbler shows up and turns out to actually be Gwen. After recognizing him, she asks if he knew her from before the night Kyuduo first took her to the Goldfish Tea House. He then says that he can never forget the relationship between the former Kyujurai and Kyuduo before suddenly changing his expression and saying that she can never be her because the Kyujurai he knew is long gone. He goes on to say that seeing her makes him upset because it feels like watching an imposter play around with the memory of someone he cherishes. After telling her to extend his greeting to Kyujo, he leaves, and Kyujurai ends up taking a slow and painful walk back to the office where she sees that Kyujo has already let the sunflower she gave him die. As soon as she picks it up, he claims to not have any feelings for her, and she says she already knows before throwing it in the trash. Over the next couple of days, she develops insomnia and spends virtually all her time trying to come to terms with the fact that she has been living someone else's life without knowing how it all started. On one particular afternoon, she accidentally drops the old printouts right in front of the furnace, so Kyujo asks if she can still see clearly, but she says it's just the lack of sleep. When he suggests going back to her glasses until she feels comfortable without them, she refuses and suddenly asks if she isn't the Kyujurai he knows. After he says she is the only one who never got to know old Kyujurai, she admits that almost everything about her life might belong to someone else before saying that some of the new stuff, like her goldfish and love for lemon chicken, definitely belong to her. When she also says her love for him is true, he interrupts and explains that she is merely living through an illusion that forces her to believe she has feelings for him. As she tries to explain how real her feelings are, she suddenly starts coughing and loses consciousness while he runs to catch her. Sometime in the past, Kyujurai took Kyudo out to celebrate his transfer to the branch and apologized for not knowing anyone else who would have wanted to join. After saying that it wasn't a problem, he asked if the rumors of Kowloon once being demolished were true, and she explained that it actually got destroyed years ago. This made him confused, so he asked how it was still standing, and she told him how the residents illegally rebuilt it because they just couldn't give up the nostalgic feeling they got from living there. Shortly after that, they started heading out, but after stumbling into a wall, Kyujurai reminded him of a spot he always talked about before asking if they served booze. He then explained that he didn't know enough about their menu yet but refused to take her anywhere else because she clearly had too many. The next moment, her plot armor slipped, so he told her to put it back and said she had to handle herself with more care. All of a sudden, she pulled him in for a kiss and admitted to having feelings for him, so he pushed her back against the wall for a hot makeout session. The following morning, Kyujurai wakes up in his bed and gets shocked when he tells her that he had to bring her back to his place. So he reminds her that she suddenly passed out and remained unconscious since then. As she tries to wrap her head around everything, he suddenly offers to tell her everything about the Kyujurai he was in love with. But after thinking about how the truth might make her current life meaningless, she tells him not to worry. He then promises to explain what happened to Lee, and when she asks if he saw the key to her place, he shows her a spare from his time with the old Kyujurai and asks if she really doesn't want to know how he got it. Once again, she claims to not want the truth, so he gives her the key and explains how she should lock his place up before heading out. Meanwhile, Miyuki has just asked Gwen why they have to dress like strippers from Hawaii, so Gwen reminds him that the current version of Kyujurai is in love with Kudo, which can only mean that the second version of him will also want to get his back blown out. Hearing this only makes Miyuki a lot more interested, so they head over to the Goldfish Tea House, and Gwen points out how similar it looks to the one he knows. At the back moments later, he tells Miyuki that they are definitely in a different Kowloon, because when he was still a waiter, there was a cat shelter he built to keep all the strays safe from rain. He then takes Miyuki to a shop that sells Hebanuma eye drops from 3 years ago like they were just made, but Miyuki tells him that it's perfectly normal for old products to get resold years after production. Gwen still insists that something is off about the current Kowloon, and when he says Kyujurai still has the same mole on her face, Miyuki gets shocked and reminds him that beauty marks like that don't get replicated when clones are made. While he suddenly gets excited to learn more about her, Kyudo tries to enjoy a peaceful smoke on the balcony. Meanwhile, Yaomei has just shown up to Kyujurai's place to express how excited she is over the new job she got. After congratulating her, Kyujurai explains how her former self they saw in that photo has apparently passed away, and Yaomei nearly loses bladder control before asking if she knows everything about her. When Kyujurai says she didn't want to ask Kyudo about it, she gets even more surprised, so Kyujurai explains her decision to focus on living as her own person and not the low-quality version of her former self. After Yaomei accepts her decision but says her origin will always be a mystery, Kyujurai tells her about the time Miyuki said her wrinkles had always been there. Yaomei then says she might be a clone and brings up the night she stumbled on a post about the Gene Terra company's plans to conduct research on a type of clones they called zirconians. Upon hearing this, Kyujurai remembers a gem called zirconia that they use as a fake substitute for diamonds, and this makes her a bit emotional as she starts to think her entire life might be fake. But then Yaomei tells her to join her in bed after turning all the lights off. Kyujirai quickly climbs in and Loki expects to have her first scissoring. But then Yaomei shows her how brightly the fake gem glows just to explain that being fake doesn't mean she can't have an amazing life. At the office the following day, Kyuduo notices that she is in an unusually good mood, so he asks if anything special happened. But she only tells him that she will be having lunch with Yaomei instead of their usual routine. On his way back from lunch hours later, he hears their voices and quickly hides before they walk past him. Just then, Yaomei asks Kyujirai if she has considered moving out of her current apartment and starting over completely so she can fully embrace a new identity. When she claims to be good with her current room, Yaomei asks why she would want to live in the shadow of her former self, so she explains that it is the only lasting proof of old Kyujirai's existence. Later that day, she meets Kyuduo on the balcony to tell him about a housewarming party Xiaomei has planned to celebrate her new place, and when she asks if he wants to join them, he refuses but hands her some money as his contribution. However, he still ends up joining them on the roof thanks to Xiaomei's persuasion, and Yaomei immediately serves him all the lemon on the platter so she can have all the chicken. Moments later, she pulls out pictures of a new apartment for Kyujirai to look at, but after she still refuses to even consider it, Yaomei asks Kyuduo if he thinks getting a new place would be good for her. After he says she can move if she wants to, she stands on her decision to stay in the current apartment. A couple of minutes later, Yaomei and Xiaomei offer to pack up the table and chairs, so the two of them go to burn the trash. As he then takes that opportunity to get a smoke break, she asks for a spare cigarette, but he uses that to make fun of her because he only has one left. Just then, she notices Miyuki's banner and reminds him of the day he came to the office before he suddenly pins her against the railing and reaches in. Instead of a kiss, he shares some of the cigarette smoke and tells her to stop leaving herself open before leaving. The following afternoon, she finds him playing mahjong with the old guys, and after saying she has decided to ditch lunch with Yaomei for their usual spot, she notices that Mr. Young isn't around and asks why. While they try to explain his sudden disappearance, Miyuki welcomes him to the facility and assures him that they are only conducting a routine checkup. Just then, he gets a call from some of his workers who have just brought what looks like a second Mr. Young to Kowloon. But as soon as he steps foot inside, the current Mr. Young vanishes into thin air. With that, he and Gwen agree that his clone is definitely not running around somewhere. But then Miyuki gets curious about the original Kyujirai and asks how she died. While Gwen tells him that it was an accident, Kudo and Kyujirai start heading home, and when she starts asking if he has any idea why Mr. Young would suddenly vanish, he tells her that he might have kicked the bucket. She immediately tells him to stop joking about that, but he goes on to say that people are fragile before asking for what she knows about the original Kyujirai. When she says Gwen only told her that she passed away, he suddenly starts laughing and says he is the one responsible for her death. Comment Stoner Baddie if you want the next part, and don't forget to turn on post notifications after subscribing to be the first to see our next video.